Barbara Susan Schreiber, affectionately referred to as Barbie, and Darlene Zetterower, who was born in Savannah, Georgia, to Wilma Joyce and Robert Charles Zetterower, had an unbreakable connection. The two girls were the definition of friendship. They both were born in 1961, only a few months apart. Having completed their 8th grade at Hicks Middle School, they were eager to begin their much-awaited summer vacation in Hollywood, Florida. On the fateful evening of June 18, 1975, the teenagers Barbara and Darlene left Barbara's Hollywood residence, telling Barbara's mother that they would be going to spend the night at their friend Valerie's house. The accounts regarding the specifics of their activities that evening are contradictory. Nonetheless, the majority of reports state that they paid a visit to Darlene's close friend Gail's house. On a bright day of June in 1975, 14-year-olds Barbara Schreiber and Darlene Zetterower strolled through the streets of their Hollywood neighborhood. They stopped to sit on a bench at the corner of Sterling Road in Northwest 40th Street. The last credible eyewitness to the best friend's whereabouts, Gail, remembered clearly seeing them sitting together on a street bench in Hollywood, close to the intersection of Hollywood Boulevard and Route 441. Her recollections of Darlene depict a vibrant, carefree girl with a distinctive way of pulling her hair back with her fingers. Neither of the girls had a car or drove one, just like most other teenagers of their era. Therefore, they frequently relied on hitchhiking as a means of mobility. The trio relished the joyful summer days preceding high school, while laughter flooded the atmosphere. However, on that fatal day, Gail remembers a white van unexpectedly pulling up next to the bench. Gail watched as both her friends voluntarily climbed into the white van. Sadly, their fate had been decided once the door closed. Darlene and Barbara, in contrast to Gail, were bold and gregarious girls. Gail, on the other hand, longed to go on their trips with them, but her father was strict and wouldn't ever have allowed her to get into a stranger's van. Gail ultimately made the decision to stay. In the end, her astute parenting proved to be the difference between life and death for her, since it marked the final moment Darlene and Barbara were seen alive. Without a trace, Barbara and Darlene went missing. The explanation behind this terrible kidnapping remained a perplexing mystery. Then, on the morning of June 19, 1975, a family on a fishing trip came across the dead bodies of two girls in their teenage years. It was Darlene and Barbara. They were lying next to one another by the canal, a startling sight that followed Highway 27, about 4 miles north of Andytown, a long-gone trucker outpost. Detectives asserted that both individuals had died from gunshot wounds, most likely from a high-caliber bullet, perhaps a .45, as evidenced by the significant amount of blood found at the scene. Blood splatter examination revealed that the girls passed away at the exact same spot where the bodies were discovered. Regarding the state of their clothing, different stories surfaced. Some said they were fully dressed, while others alluded to something much more darker. Both of them were mercilessly forced before the tragic incident. After the bodies of the girls had been found, Gail, the last person to have seen them alive, shared her concern through the media. She recalled, "I was scared for them. I was clueless about what was going on. I'm glad I refrained from getting into that unknown van with them." Gail deeply remarked, "I think the person behind this was just a sick individual." The community was plagued by a great deal of ambiguity regarding what led to the terrible end of Barbara and Darlene. Police's initial investigation took them to Valerie, the alleged host of the planned sleepover, and there they met a startling revelation. The teenagers had never intended to stay the night together. It was a trick that Barbara and Darlene frequently pulled off when they wanted to go out without their parents' knowledge. Witness statements led Broward County investigators to believe the girls may have been hoping to hitch a ride north, maybe to get some narcotics. The innocence and youth of the victims garnered huge backing from the media and general public, but the absence of modern technology presented unsurmountable obstacles for detectives trying to apprehend the unknown offender. From the beginning, the investigation was very challenging because there were no leads to follow. The case went cold eventually. Andrew Giannino, a detective of the Broward County Sheriff's Office, carried the burden of the unsolved case for decades. Many of the detectives, officers, crime scene investigators, and forensic specialists from the Broward Sheriff's Office were involved in this unrelenting quest for justice. Decades later, their persistent efforts to find the truth behind the unexplained mystery paid off. Early in 2023, the Cold Case Unit of the Broward Sheriff's Office assumed command. They were greeted with mounds of reports, lots of pictures of the crime scene, evidentiary boxes, and Barbara and Darlene's clothing. Through a thorough examination of Darlene's clothing, Detective Roberto of the BSO Crime Scene Unit isolated DNA embedded in the fabric. The result of this painstaking process was what the investigators had been awaiting for nearly 5 decades, until finally they were able to obtain the suspect's complete DNA profile. Armed with this discovery, detectives dug through databases for a long time before ultimately finding a match. The cold case team developed a clear connection that led to the principal suspect in the case being identified as Robert Clark Keebler, based on his biological artifacts. The revelation provided a glimmer of hope following years of agonizing ambiguity, bringing Barbara and Darlene one step closer to justice. The investigation of Robert Clark Keebler's background revealed an alarming history of armed robbery, forced intercourse, and aggravated assault extending from California to South Florida. The possibility of Keebler's conviction was eliminated when the investigators confirmed that he had passed away in South Florida in 2019. Still, the search for answers for the relatives of the victims continued. Detective Giannino's investigation led him to the conclusion that Robert Clark Keebler took Barbara and Darlene to the secluded Everglades, where he brutally assaulted and then shot them after. According to Detective Andrew Giannino, upon discovery the case was very difficult to solve. In a recently published BSO video, Mr. Giannino stated, "It's just sad that 2 14-year-old girls were unalived in such a way. There simply isn't another way to put it. Really, it's senseless." There had been no evidence connecting Keebler to the case prior to the DNA testing. With a sense of closure brought to the case, a new chapter of investigation opens. According to Detective Giannino, they are also investigating any potential link between Keebler and the unsolved flat tire murders, which took place in the Broward and Miami-Dade area between 1975 and 1976. We're investigating all previous homicides that occurred in this area to determine whether Keebler can be connected to any of them through DNA evidence. Please contact us at 954-321-4376 if you know anything regarding Darlene and Barbara. Any recollections of what happened in June 1975-75, associations, friendships, anything at all. It may mean nothing to them, but everything to us. As detectives tirelessly dig through the past in search of clues, they continue to look for DNA evidence connecting these crimes with the tragedy of Barbara and Darlene. Darlene and Barbara were robbed of the opportunity to live life to the fullest, and their loved ones and family continue to grieve them. Their testimonies are a moving reminder of lives taken too soon, their unfulfilled potential, a tragedy recorded in history, and the community's collective memory and contributions may yet hold the key to providing answers and justice. On March 29, 1983, a man while out on a stroll with his dog noticed a body of a woman floating in the San Lorenzo River on the 200th block of Woodland Drive in Ben Lomond, California. She had a nylon on her leg, a pair of black boots, and a necklace of pearls. Next to it was discovered a navy blue cape. When sheriff's deputies got to the scene of the crime, they found further evidence. The woman was promptly identified as Joette Marie Smith. She was 33 years old and the proprietor of Buffalo Gals, a popular eatery in her community. Joette was praised as a remarkable woman who exuded warmth, bliss, compassion, and vigor. When someone needed her, she was always there. Joette was last seen on March 27, 1983, when she closed the restaurant and walked across the street to her studio apartment, which she shared with a friend of her named Rachel Devereaux. Rachel's 46-acre property would be inaccessible during the winter's rainy season, thus she would stay at Joette's and work with her during that time. The two women were watching the television show Thunderbirds while eating some popcorn. Then Joette excused to make some phone calls. Meanwhile, Rachel went to sleep, saying she was worn out. At 3 a.m., Rachel woke up and realized that Joette wasn't in the apartment. This wasn't anything concerning since Joette would frequently visit the restaurant late at night. Joette had actually left the apartment and walked to a local bar to get some cigarettes, as the detectives would later discover. She had first tried to visit a nearby store, but it was closed, so she strolled to Henfling's Inn, a bar located in Ben Lomond. There, Joette had been offered a ride home by a waitress who knew her. Nevertheless, she turned her down, saying it was a beautiful night, so she preferred to walk. That would be the last time that Joette was seen alive. On her way back home, the detectives think she may have been stopped by the bridge. Subsequently, an autopsy was conducted which revealed her cause of death to be strangulation, and the presence of sexual activity was also ruled. Her death was classified as a homicide. Authorities had very few leads to work with. After speaking with everyone who knew Joette, including those who had seen her that evening, they still weren't able to find anything useful. Nobody they talked to believed Joette had any enemies or someone who intended to harm her. The detectives had physical evidence, yet there wasn't anything to compare it to, as DNA testing was not yet available. It had been a decade since Joette relocated to Ben Lomond, and she was preparing a grand party for the restaurant's upcoming 8th anniversary. She went to college in Kansas, but she was originally from Colorado Springs. Her family lived in Omaha, Nebraska, where she was born. Her mother took her body with her back to Nebraska, where she now rests in peace. All the leads had been exhausted, and her case would remain unsolved until the year 1988, when investigators came across a potential suspect, a man by the name of Eric David Drummond. He has had a lengthy criminal record in Nevada and California, with history of sexual assault. It would be revealed to the detectives that Drummond had invited Joette out on a date which she had declined. Following the killing, Drummond had soon left California. Although they had some circumstantial evidence linking him to the crime, more tangible proof was needed before they could file a case against him. Joette's case would ultimately become cold. Her case was revisited in 2022 with the goal of utilizing DNA technologies that had not been available in 1983. From the 1983's evidence, a male DNA sample was obtained. They managed to secure a direct DNA sample from Drummond, who was currently 64 years old, in August of 2022. The evidentiary sample and the freshly obtained DNA sample precisely matched. Sadly, in September, whilst the investigators were making efforts to obtain an arrest warrant, Drummond took his own life. The family and loved ones of Joette finally have answers, even though justice won't be served. The detectives have also entered Drummond's DNA into CODIS, in order to find out if he is connected to any more unsolved cases. In a statement to the press, Joette's sister stated, "I just came to the realization a long time ago that they probably would never find her killer. The announcement was a little bit disappointing, but I wouldn't say that we didn't get justice. The DNA was a match, and it's closure." As we wrap up the story of Joette Marie Smith, it feels like we're left with more questions than answers. Even though DNA technology helped find a match to the suspect, Eric David Drummond, and gave Joette's family some peace, Drummond's suicide before he could be arrested leaves a bittersweet feeling. What if he was caught earlier? Are there other cases out there connected to him that we don't know about? This case reminds us that sometimes, even when we get answers, justice isn't always served in the way we expect. What do you think? Could there be more to this story? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. Imagine waking up to find your world shattered, a loved one brutally taken from you under the veil of night. How far would you go for answers? In the quiet towns of the East Bay, 2 families were torn apart by such tragedies, 7 years and countless questions separating them. Nelie Hicks, a beloved 4th-grade teacher, was found lifeless in her Newark home in 1972, her final moments marred by violence. 7 years later, Theresa Pica's world in Hayward was shattered similarly, her life cruelly snatched away. Both women suffered in their own sanctuaries, under the same moon, with their families unknowingly just rooms away. They both were found by family members as they woke up in the morning and stumbled upon viciously battered and assaulted bodies. They had been sleeping in their living rooms as the assailant had broken into their houses and attacked them. DNA evidence recovered from Pica's body had been examined many times over the last 2 decades, and a number of individuals suspected of being the perpetrator had been ruled out. The remains of a possible suspect, exhumed 2 years ago, were identified but later ruled out by DNA analysis of the evidence from the crime scene. But according to the authorities, that man was on the same genealogical tree. The investigation got underway long before recent advances in forensic DNA testing and even before CODIS was founded. Years later, when CODIS analysis became accessible, an STR profile was created for the suspect. Nevertheless, CODIS never yielded a match to any known person for this profile. Despite a thorough investigation, both of the cases remained cold for decades. Until in 2021, when Othram received forensic evidence from the Hayward Police Department at its facility in Woodlands, Texas. With the use of forensic-grade genome sequencing, Othram researchers were able to create a thorough DNA profile for the unknown perpetrator. Ultimately, the profile was created and then sent to the detectives who collaborated with the FBI's Forensic Genetic Genealogy team. The findings led to the identification of Fred Bernard Farnham as the culprit. Authorities have warned law enforcement in numerous other jurisdictions to re-examine their cold cases in order to look for possible connections, as they believe Farnham is likely to be implicated in further unsolved homicides. At a press conference held at Hayward City Hall, Hayward Police Chief Brian Matthews stated that the search for answers is still ongoing. We believe Farnham may be responsible for additional sexual assaults and murders in other communities. Then Matthews described Farnham's life's journey geographically. He was born and raised in the Central Valley, moved to the South Bay in the 1950s, and was charged of multiple sexual assaults there in the 1970s. There isn't any proof that he ever resided in the East Bay. He also resided in Oregon, where he passed away in the town of Cape Junction, as well as Nevada, Idaho, North Dakota, and Alaska. Farnham's criminal history in Santa Clara County dates back to the 1970s. He was convicted of multiple sexual assaults in Sunnyvale and San Jose, and he consequently served time in prison. On May 10, 1972, the lifeless body of a 59-year-old 4th-grade teacher, Hicks, was discovered in her Newark home at Ashland School in San Lorenzo. Ron, her son, was the one who found her body, who himself passed away 3 months before the police could solve the cold case of Hicks. Police learned that she had been assaulted and battered with a brick wrapped in pantyhose, as evidenced by the partially naked state of her body. The viciousness was readily apparent, as her head was split open by the trauma. Evidence at the crime scene suggested that the attacker had broken into her house through an opened sliding glass door and used manicure scissors to cut off her dress and bra. The only forensic evidence that the authorities could retrieve were fingerprints that had never been linked to a particular individual for decades. What made the homicide even more notorious is the fact that Hicks' adult son, his wife, and her longtime friend all were staying in the house and were asleep when the tragedy happened. This led authorities to believe that the intruder had knocked her unconscious before assaulting her. Everyone who knew Hicks, who was regarded as a well-liked and respected teacher, was baffled as to who could have done this to her. She had separated from an abusive marriage a decade before, but neither that lead nor the questioning of other men she had dated helped identify a potential suspect. Before the murder, at 1 a.m, Hicks' housemate, another teacher, had a brief conversation with her whilst she slept on the living room sofa. It was the last time she was heard from or seen alive. Around 4 hours later, she was found dead in the same room by Hicks' son. Hicks' wallet was reported missing, but it was subsequently discovered a few blocks away, next to a pair of blood-stained underpants. David Hicks is the youngest and one of the 3 living children of Nelie Hicks's 6 children. The victim's son, who discovered the body during the holidays, expressed gratitude to the authorities for their persistent efforts to bring the 52-year-old cold case to a conclusion. Hicks referred to his mother as a hero for raising a family of 6 whilst holding a full-time teaching position. "I cannot express my gratitude enough for the police department and their dedication to this case. All of them worked extremely hard to bring closure to our family." On May 15, 1979, Pica, 48 years old, was found face down and slumped over a sofa at her house on Edlow Drive in Hayward by one of her 10-year-old twin daughters. Her nightgown was pulled up, leaving her legs exposed. Her hands had been tied with a rope behind her back, and a blood-stained rock was discovered near her. Investigators determined that she had been choked with a shirt. Her 3 kids had last seen her alive the previous evening. One neighbor reported hearing rustling late at night from the house, and that was the only witness account of the intruder. A front room window had been forced open. Pica's purse went missing, and her wallet and other items were subsequently found in a neighbor's yard and in a garbage can down the street. Over the next few decades, several people had been the subject of investigations, but until recently, no suspect was identified. Farnham's identification offered closure, and Pica's daughter expressed relief in a statement spoken aloud during the press conference. The statement stated, "Our mother may now rest peacefully. We've come to terms with the fact that whoever did this would never face justice. Nevertheless, we thank God for your diligence and for never giving up. We can now move forward and put this traumatic chapter in our lives behind us." Following Pica's demise, Newark Police Captain Jolie Macchius said that Hayward and Newark Police connected the killings due to a recognizable behavioral pattern between the 2 cases, which fostered the notion that solving one would solve the other. According to her, today is really about these families and their perseverance over the previous 50 or more years. Anyone with information regarding any case that may involve Farnham can reach Hayward Police Officer Rob Parnell at 510-293-7176. 30 years ago, a mystery unfolded that left a community searching for answers. Now, a surprising twist brings new hope to a cold case that many thought would remain unsolved forever. Imagine, decades after a tragic event, the very family connected to the suspect steps forward, offering crucial pieces to a puzzle that has puzzled detectives for years. What could compel a family to break their silence after so long? And how does a single stick become the key to unlocking secrets buried for a lifetime? Join us as we explore a tale of mystery, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Have you ever wondered what it takes to solve a case that's gone cold for over 3 decades? What happens when a long-forgotten story finds its way back into the light, challenging everything we thought we knew? At a press conference held precisely 30 years after the incident, investigators said that Ronald Cates's family members come forward to assist in cracking the Orange County cold case. Cates was the guy accused of killing his friend in Orlando in 1992. On August 10, 1992, early in the morning, the wife of 53-year-old John Stagner discovered her husband fatally beaten while lying over the bed. Deputies were dispatched to the residence on North Forsyth Road. According to Orange County Sheriff John Mina, he sustained severe facial and head injuries. Stagner was a dedicated maintenance worker for Orange County, stated the investigators, and at the time of his death, He was residing on county's maintenance property. Mina informed reporters that although the sheriff's office suspected Kate, who had been a person of interest from the beginning, of committing the crime, there wasn't enough evidence to warrant an arrest. Kate was said to have had a drug addiction at the time and would frequently take multiple power tools from Stagner, which he would later pawn to pay for his drugs. It was alleged that Stagner had approached him about it and demanded that he give the tools back. On the day of the killing, investigators went to his residence for a discussion regarding the case. However, he allegedly had his daughter lie and say that he wasn't there. Later on, investigators came to know that he was hiding under the house that day. They interrogated Kate the next day and the day following on August 18, 1992, and mentioned that there were discrepancies between the time frame he provided and what his family members were stating. The case continued, and in 1995, according to the sheriff's office, Kate allegedly confessed to his family in a desperate attempt that he had killed Stagner. However, Kate's was not charged as there wasn't enough evidence, given the limitations of technology at the time. Regarding the unsolved case, a member of Kate's family approached the Orange County Sheriff's Office in 2020. Even though they were the suspect's family, they were deeply invested in this case, since Mr. Stagner had been incredibly kind to Kate's family. He used to offer them money or a place to stay whenever they needed it, said Detective Kevin Wilson. The investigators talked to Kate's wife and daughter and began further investigation into the case. In March 2022, Wilson mentioned that they started conducting in-depth interviews with family members. All their lives, they had lived in constant fear of Mr. Kate since he had been so violent to them. While in a North Carolina hospital in April 2022, Kate's reportedly revealed to a nurse that he had murdered a person in Florida in 1992. She later told a security guard, according to the Orange County Sheriff's Office, and after a bit of research, they found out the 1992 case on their website. Officers from the Salisbury Police Department in North Carolina went to the hospital and captured Kate's admission on body camera's footage. The sheriff's office stated that Kate did not reveal his motive behind the killing in his confession. He merely gave a vague explanation of how he struck Johnny with a stick, Wilson added. Based on his family's account, Kate's used to walk with a walking stick. That stick was discovered at the scene of the crime. The detective claimed that at that moment, there was sufficient evidence to re-interview Kate and accuse him of killing Stagner. Kate was subsequently taken into custody on August 5th on the count of murder in first degree. He is currently imprisoned in a North Carolina jail as he awaits extradition to Florida. The sheriff's office had established a cold case unit in 2020, according to Mina. And since then, that unit has resolved 13 cases that date back to 1984. As the sun sets on this chilling tale of unresolved secrets and a family's courageous quest for truth, we are left to ponder the deep complexities of justice and redemption. After 30 years of silence, a cold case warms with the hope of closure, yet so many questions remain. What led Ronald Cates's family, once shrouded in fear, to step into the light, seeking justice, not just for a beloved maintenance worker, but perhaps, in a way, for themselves too? And as Cates awaits his day in court, we are reminded of the countless stories still lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment of truth. How many more untold mysteries lie dormant, and what does it take for those closest to the darkness to finally bring them into the light? We invite you to dive into the depths of this case, share your thoughts, and perhaps together we can shed light on the shadows that remain. What do you think lies at the heart of this family's decision to confront their darkest fears? If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of cold cases.